One of those popular areas of interest and discussion in the watch world is the never-ending search for the best watch under $1,000. So what I thought would be fun is to try to determine the winner and letting you all decide that winner through a tournament. Over the past month, we have been going through a bracket style tournament, starting with 34 watches under $1,000 until we got down to one final winner. And after thousands of votes, what I wanted to do in this video is share those results that people decided on for the best watch under $1,000. So how we started was we created a form where you all voted for your top watches under $1,000. We had 34 selections on that form, and they included no-brainer pieces that commonly are chosen as good buys in the price category. But we had the tough task of having to narrow down the field to just 16 watches. So with that form, what we did was we had people vote on that form their top 10 watches of the 34. So from those thousands of participants, they selected their top 10. There were no discontinued watches on the list, so no SARB 033, SKX as an example. And from there, we ranked all of the watches based on what models received the highest amount of top 10 votes, creating a 1 to 16 bracket. Some notable findings here as we were going through this is there was only one Casio that made it to the final 16 bracket, the Casio, while models like the DW5600, the Duro, 9052 were all left outside looking in. Also, you had diving legends like the Turtle, the Citizen dive watches, and the Vostok Amphibia not making the cut. But now let's go through and look at our 16 finalists. Receiving 31% of the top 10 votes is the Bulova Lunar Pilot, coming in at that 16 seed. Moving along to the 15 seed and receiving 31.7% of the top 10 vote, you have the Seiko 5KX. And then in the 14th seed, we have the Orient Komatsu, coming in with 32.5% of top 10 votes. Then the Mito Ocean Star makes an appearance with 32.7% of the top 10 votes. Next up to the 12th position, we see a bigger jump in the percentage share of that top 10 with the Seagull 1963 receiving 40.1% of that top 10 vote. Tissot Gentleman takes the 11th seed with 40.7% of that vote. And then the Orient Bambino takes the 10 seed with 41.6% of the top 10 vote. Now breaking into the single digit seeds, we have Hamilton Murph with 42.5%, the Seiko Speed Timer with 46.1%, then moving up to another Seiko with the Seiko 5 GMT coming in with 47.6% of the top 10 vote. The Seoul G-Shock and Seoul Casio on this list comes in with the 6th seed at 48% of the top 10 vote with the Casio G-Shock Casio. For the 5th position, we have the Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical coming in with 48.7% of the vote, and then right above it is the Hamilton Khaki Field Auto coming in at 49.8%. In the 3rd seed, the Seiko Cocktail Time sits firmly in that position with 56.1% of the vote. And then just above it at the 2nd position is the Seiko Alpinist with 59.6% of top 10 votes. And then to round out for the 1st position here, receiving top 10 votes 72.9% of the time, the Tissot PRX. Now Seiko was the leading brand when it came to the most under 1,000 in this top 16, with 5 watches being represented in this final bracket. And Hamilton had 3 that actually got into the top 16, with all of them coming from the Field collection. And Orient and Tissot rounded it out with 2 selections in the top 16. And now before we jump into the bracket, if you want to shop watches under $1,000, we put together a comprehensive best under $1,000 shopping collection on our website, teddybaldassarre.com. If you want to check it out, it's all been curated, some really good picks, also some picks outside of this. If you're not all about the most popular and you want something that's a little bit more in the weeds, we'll have that in the description down below. Any purchase also supports the content and allows us to keep doing what we're doing here. We don't take money from the brands in producing any of this content. I don't think the brands would even be thrilled about this video to begin with, but it allows us to keep doing what we're doing, and we love what we do here. So now let's continue though with the bracket. So the round number 1, first matchup, looking at the biggest separation in seeding with the 1st seed going up against the 16 seed. If you've ever watched any sporting tournament, March Madness as an example, this is how it usually goes. So we're just gonna follow that flow. This had the Tissot PRX going up against the Bulova Lunar Pilot, and receiving 73% of the vote was the Tissot PRX. Next, we have 2 Seiko models, the 2nd seed, the Seiko Alpinist, going up against the Seiko 5KX, receiving 65% of the vote. Pretty easy win. We have the Seiko Alpinist, so it moves on. So actually the biggest blowout of any of the first round actually came from the 3 seed versus the 14 seed, with the Orient Komatsu at that 14 seed versus the Seiko Cocktail Time. The Cocktail Time came away with 76% of the total vote. We move on to the 4 seed versus the 13 seed, Hamilton Khaki Field Auto versus the Mito Ocean Star, and the Khaki Field moves on with 73% of the vote. 5th versus the 12 seed was a little bit closer than expected. We have the Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical versus the Seagull 1963, and the Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical comes in with 64% of the vote, not winning as decisively as the Auto. So now we have our 6th seed versus our 11th seed, and this was the first upset of the tournament and probably the most notable upset. A pretty big separation in the seeding results. Casio G-Shock Casio losing in the first round, 42% of the vote only, versus the Tissot Gentleman at the 11th seed getting 58% of the vote. A surpriser and a bracket buster in the first round. Now we have the 7 seed Seiko 5 GMT going up against the Orient Bambino. Tough matchup here, but the Seiko 5 GMT just edges it out over the Bambino with 53% of the vote. And for the final matchup, the 2 closest seeds produce the closest results. Looking at the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph versus the Seiko Speed Timer, the Murph just edged it out by around 100 votes with 51% of the total vote. So now we narrowed it down. The field is down to 8 total watches and we go into round 2. So moving right along here, number 1 seed going up against the 9th seed Hamilton Khaki Field Murph. And this was actually closer than expected. It was actually the closest matchup of any of round 2, with the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph actually coming in with 43% of the total vote, but 57% going to that of the PRX. So the number 1 seed continues to move on. Now 2 head-to-head matchups in the Hamilton Khaki Field collection. We have the Field Automatic versus the Field Mechanical. This was a bigger win than I was expecting. I thought these were going to be closer together, but Auto wins pretty decisively. Now we move along to the Seiko 5 GMT versus the Seiko Alpinist, so a head-to-head Seiko matchup, and pretty decisively, more than I expected, the Alpinist wins out, getting 69% of the total vote. This was the biggest win of any matchup in the second round. And to finish out our round of 8 here, we have the Tissot Gentleman versus the Seiko Cocktail Time. The Cocktail Time coming in with that 3rd seeding is going to win out and stay true, so no upsets this round. 58% of the vote going to the Cocktail Time, while the Gentleman only gets 42%. So with that, we have 4 watches remaining. So our head-to-head matchups include the Tissot PRX versus the Hamilton Khaki Field Auto, so the 1 versus the 4 seed. And then for that other matchup, we have 2 Seiko watches, the Seiko Alpinist, and then the Seiko Cocktail Time. Now looking at the 1 to 4 matchup, this was actually the closer of the matchups of our round of 4, so our semifinals here, with the Tissot PRX coming in with only 56% of the vote. So the Hamilton Khaki Field Auto, very close, and the closest matchup we've seen since round 1. So Tissot PRX just edges it out. Then the 2 versus the 3, the Seiko Alpinist wins decisively with a 60% win versus the 40% from the Seiko Cocktail Time. Not to say that I'm not a believer in the Alpinist, but I am very surprised about how well it is doing so far in the tournament, advancing all the way as a number 2 seed. So our final matchup, the 1 versus the 2 seed. So I think our seeding was pretty accurate. They have continued each one of these individual matchups. They've won every single matchup. 1 seed with the Tissot PRX, 2 seed with the Seiko Alpinist. Who wins out? Looking at the tail of the tape of these 2 combatants going up against each other. So with the Tissot PRX, you're getting 40 millimeters versus 39.5 millimeters, 100 meters versus 200 meters. So maybe you give a slight reach advantage to that of the Alpinist there. Seiko has the better loom, better bracelet goes to the PRX, 70 hours for the Alpinist for its power reserve on its 6R movement versus 80 hours, both operating at 21,600 vibrations per hour. And accuracy, typically out of the box, Tissot is going to deliver more there. So in general, pretty good competitive matchup here. So drum roll please, final results, head-to-head matchup, thousands of people voted, and the winner was the Tissot PRX, winning with 52% of the vote, the second tightest matchup of the entire tournament, with the Alpinist coming away with 48%. We had this up on our story for about 24 hours, and the Alpinist was quickly gaining on the PRX. It was narrowing that margin of victory, and probably if you kept it going for maybe a few more hours, who knows? We could have actually seen a little bit of an upset in the final. But that is the final tournament. The Tissot PRX, congratulations, is the winner. There were tens of thousands of people that voted in this tournament. Hundreds of thousands of votes were casted, so it's hard to dispute the results. I don't necessarily disagree with the final results. I was surprised at how well the Alpinist did, because it's, although probably one of the best value Seiko watches on the entire market, especially above $500, I would say it's not the most straightforward watch. It's kind of a weird watch. It has the compass bezel, it has the 2 crown position, cathedral hands. Cyclops, it's a little bit weird if we're talking about the SPB 121, but Green Dial also probably is not as versatile as some other dials out there, but it really was close to winning the entire tournament. So that was a big surprise for me. I was also surprised by Casio. It was probably the underachiever of the tournament in my opinion. Although under $1,000 when thinking of Casio, I think if it was under $500, it would be a different story, but only seeing one advance to the round of 16, and then in addition to that, not getting one win the entire tournament for a brand like Casio. And then two other surprises for me. I was surprised that the Seiko 5 GMT didn't fare a little bit better. I would have thought that that may have gone a little bit farther along in the tournament, or have gotten actually a higher seeding. So that was one thing that was a little bit of a surprise. And then finally, looking at one other takeaway, the automatic Hamilton Khaki Field substantially winning out way more of the votes than that of the mechanical. I think that makes sense, 100 meters. I think that's probably a bigger upside. I think a lot of people also like an automatic movement compared to a hand winding mechanical. And then maybe some of the foam markers on the mechanical maybe isn't as much of what people are going for compared to the more contemporary looking automatic. But all right guys, that is the tournament here today. If you enjoyed this style of video, let me know by giving this video a thumbs up, because that is a great indicator. I think this could be an entire series we do on the channel. I had a blast doing all of this. So if you guys enjoyed it too and you want us to do more of this, then definitely let me know in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up. That's a great indicator for me that you want to see more of this. We can continue this series with different price points, different genres of watches. There's a lot to do here, and I like how it keeps you all involved. So if you want to stay in the loop for more of this, I'd also recommend following us on Instagram and some of our other social channels so you can stay in the loop. I found Instagram to be the best place to do these polls because it's not as intrusive as other platforms and it's built into the system itself already, so it's easy to get that engagement level. So be sure to be following there especially. Also, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.